Hello everyone. In this video we are going to continue from task 6 of the project 0x07, see even more pointers, arrays and strings. So this question here says we should write a function that prints the chessboard, and this is the prototype. So what does this question mean? Let's look at the output here. When you look at this is the chessboard they're talking about. So we are supposed to print the element inside this chessboard, this R, K, P and so on, all of it, just as the way it is printed here. Did you see that? So all the element inside this is printed. So but before we solve this problem here, I need to explain a concept for you, which is the multi-dimensional array. So all what we've been doing in the past, we are just dealing with a single dimensional array, right? Just one row. But in this case, we are dealing with a multi-dimensional array. So let me create this test file and let me explain what a multi-dimensional array is. Okay? So an array with 2 dimensions is known as a 2D array. Okay, 2-dimensional array, and when an array has more than 1 dimension, it is called a multi-dimensional array. Okay, it can be of any dimension. Okay, so if I should say hash, I'm just trying to explain multi-dimensional array for you. So stdio.h. So here if I should say main void. All right, so in case of multi-dimensional array, what we normally do is we need to define the number of rows and the number of columns that we want to pass to our array. Do you get it? So for instance, now I want to create an array to store integer values. So if I say int, let me call it a. If I say 10 like this, we all know what this is going to do, right? It is going to contain just one row of characters containing how many characters? Sorry, digit, 10 digit. Isn't it? It's going to take 10 digits. That's what this means. But in case of multi-dimensional array, you need to define what? You need to define the column as well. Sorry, the number of row as well. So here you are just defining the column, right? You are storing 10 data inside. So you need to define the number of rows and the number of columns in a multi-dimensional array. So assuming I want an array that will hold, let's say 3 rows and let's say 4 columns, right? Yeah. Let's just say 3 rows, 3 columns. Okay, so if I should do something like this, the first index here, the first square bracket here is taking care of the rows, while the second column bracket here, sorry, square bracket is taking care of what? Of the columns. So here all what I'm saying is I want to create an array that will store integer of how many rows? 3 rows and 3 columns. So how do we initialize this array? So if I should do something like this, the first thing we need to do is open this curly brace here. So I'll press enter. I want it to be indented. So inside the curly brace, I need to create another array. Do you get it? So now I will pass my array, right? So I'm currently in the first row now, isn't it? I'm currently in the first row. So I need to pass in how many columns? 3. It means it's going to take 3 data, right? So let me just say 1, 2, and 3. Do you get it? So 1, 2, 3, right? So I pass a comma here, and I will go to the next line. So you can see now I have what? My row 1. This is my row 1, and it has how many columns? 3. 1, 2, 3. So now let me create my row 2. So here, what should it take? Let me just say 4, 5, 6 here. This is my row 2, right? So here, the last row, which is going to be 7, 8, and 9, right? So this is what? A 3-dimensional array, right? It contains 3 rows. Do you get it? So how do we access the element of this array? First we need to close this with this. So how do we access the element of this array? So the first thing I need to do is this. When you look at this, if you don't forget how we index our elements inside an array, then this would not be difficult for you as well. So this is what? Row 0. We know that the indexing is starting from 0 because even all these elements here are inside what? A curly brace. So they themselves here are arrays. So this is index 0 of the array, right? This is index 1, this is index 2, right? So this element here, 1 here, is in index 0, index 0. It means that it is in which row? Row 0 and column what? Column 0. This is in what? Row 0, column 1. This is in what? Row 0, column 2. What of this one here? This 7 here. When you count, in which row is 7? 0, 1, 2. So it means that 7 is in what? Row 2, isn't it? Column what? Column 0, because it is the first element in row 2. Do you get it? So let's try printing the element here. I think if I should use printf, it will be clear for you. So if I should say I'm printing integers, right? So I'll say %d. All right, so how can I print this value now, 5 here? So the first thing I need to take note is, in which row is 5? This is row 1, row 0, 5 is in row 1, right? So and what is the array name? The array name is A. So I'll just pass in A, and then I'll pass in 1. So now I've targeted the row. So what element in row 1 am I targeting? I'm targeting 5. And 5 is in which index in row 1? Index 1, because this is index 0, and this is what? Index 1. So I need to pass what? 1 here. I just say 1. Do you get it? So let's try compiling this. Tests.c-ot. Yeah, so it has been compiled. So let's run it. So did you see that I got 5 printed? So it means I'm able to access this element here. What if I want to target this 9 here? 9 is in which row first? It is in what? Row 0, row 1, row 2, right? So I need to change this. So I will just say A in row 2. Sorry, A row 2. Right? So in which column? In which column is 9, right? So this is 0, 1, it means row index 2, right? It is in index 2 of row 2, isn't it? So I pass in what? I will pass in 2 here as well, right? So let's try printing this. So GCC. Did you see that I got 9 printed? Because 9 is what is at that position. Let's say I want to print 8. 8 is in which index of 0 2? Index 1. So if I should change this here, so I just say 1 here. So I'm expecting this to print 8. So let's run it. Did you see that I got 8 printed? So this is what a multi-dimensional array is. So as you can see here, this example here is a multi-dimensional array. So when you look at this, it is a what? It is an array of character, and the array name is board. It contains how many rows and columns? 8 rows and 8 columns. This is the size of the array. So this is what? A 2-dimensional array here. Do you get it? This is a 2D array. So it's taking what? 8 rows and 8 columns, right? So how do we access the element here? I've already showed you, right? So all we need to do now is just to print this element here. That's also what the question says. So this file I just created is just a test file. So let me delete it because it's not part of the program. All right, so let's open the file. Control C. So VI. All right, so I have my Betty documented. As you can see, I don't have the return value explained here because my function is void. I've explained that there is no need for you to explain the return value if you have a function returning void. Even if you explain what the return value is, it doesn't matter, okay? But you can leave it without explaining because your function is void. So what's the first thing we need to do here? So the first thing we need to do here, when you look at this, we need to loop over the entire row. For each row here, we loop over it, right? We loop over each of these rows here. And for each row as well, we are going to loop over the columns in the row. That is the R, K, B, Q, K, P, all and so on. Those elements here inside this row. So we need to loop over them. And for each iteration, we are going to print it, right? So I'm going to declare 2 variables which I'm going to use for this looping. So let me just say int I and int G. Sorry, you can do that you can do it on the same line, the declaration. It doesn't matter. All right, so I'll just say for I equals to what? Equals to 0. So what should be my condition? When you look at this, the size, and don't forget this is iterating over the row. And how many rows do we have? We have 8 rows. So we cannot exceed 8. So 0 to 7 will give us 8, right? So this is going to be I less than 8. Isn't it? This is going to be I less than 8, then I plus plus. So now I have a loop to loop over the rows. So and for each row here, right, this is going to loop over the rows here. And for each row, we need to loop over the columns as well, right? So I will now say for J equals to 0, what should be the condition? It is the same J less than 8 here, because we also have how many columns? 8 columns. So we cannot loop and exceed 8, or we cannot loop less than 8. So here I'll just say J plus plus. All right, so now I have this loop. So what do we need to do next? The next thing we need to do is for each iteration, we need to print what? The character that is at that position. right? We need to print the character at that position. So I'm going to use putchar here. I'll just say putchar. So what should be here? Take note, I've explained to you how we can print the element of a two-dimensional array. The first thing we need to take care of is what? We need to pass in the array name, right? So in our own case, this is the array name. This is the pointer to the array name, right? It is what? A here. So I'll just say A here. I will pass in A. Sorry, I've been referencing this number of row and number of column. This is it here. This 8 here is telling you that you have 8 number of rows and 8 number of columns. Sorry, this is the test file. So from here, it's telling you that you have 8 rows and 8 columns. Do you get it? So I have my A now passed because it is the pointer to the array. So what is the next thing I need to do here? I need to pass what? The row in which I want to get the element from. So in this case, I is responsible for printing the rows, right? So I will just pass in I. And this is not enough. If I pass in the row, I need to pass in the column as well, isn't it? And J is responsible for keeping track of the column. So I just pass in J here. So what this is going to do is, for the first iteration, I is 0. It will move to this first row here, right? That's index 0. It will move to this first row, and when it moves to this row here, this variable J here will loop over all the characters here inside the row. And for each iteration, it is going to print the characters at what? This is at what? This is at A00. These are here, right? It is at what? The A is the array name, right? And then the first 0 is the row, because this is row 0. And then the second 0 here is what? Is the column, because this is column 0. So this is column 0. So it will then print what? A, right? A01. J will be incremented, right? A01, which is this. A02, which is this. We are still in row 0. That's why I said A0. So this is A03, A04, 05, 06, 07, right? So that's how it will keep going until this condition becomes false. When this condition becomes false, it will exit out of this loop and increment the value of I. So the function will now move to the next iteration. Will now move to the next row. And this same thing will be executed again. So with this, I'll be able to get the exact characters at each index printed. Do you get it? So all I need to do here is, I think that's all. We just need a new line. So here, I will just say, after printing everything, yeah, so before moving to the next line, right, before incrementing the value of I need to go to a new line. So I just say putchar, and then I'll say /n here. I think that should be all. So let's test this. Let's run Betty first. Betty, what's the file name? Okay, 7 something, right? Yeah, so Betty is fine. So let's copy the test file, which is this, copy. So vi 7main.c, paste. All right, so here I'll just say hash I. All right, so here I will just copy the compilation command here, copy it up to this point. So paste, yeah, so it has been compiled. So let's run the compiled file. All right, so as you can see, we got the exact same element here, RKP and so whatsoever here. So when you look at this, these are the exact element inside this array here, right? The exact element inside this array. Even the spaces are printed. These are the spaces. When you look at this, these are the spaces. That's why we are having what? A space here. So this is simply how to do this. Okay, so don't forget to add, commit and push to a GitHub, then you can run your checks. So we are going to stop here. Thank you very much till we meet in our next session.